Welcome, everyone. My name is Ben Colahan. I'm the pastor at Faith Lutheran Church, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. I'm here with Reb Lisa Rappaport from Congregation Beth Israel and County Supervisor Todd Kimmelshoe. This is actually the brainchild of two county supervisors who happen to attend these two congregations, getting together and saying, how can we help our communities prepare for the end of their lives in a joyous and positive way? Would you like to say any other words, Lisa?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out also to Tammy Ritter, who is a member of our congregation who had hoped to be here today. She's county supervisor. Had hoped to be here today, but had a conflict come up where she cannot be with us. But really, I think she helped us kind of take an idea and actually say, let's get a date. Let's actually do it. She nailed it down, which I really want to thank her for, because this is a conversation we've had a lot, but it just never materializes. So it takes that person to say, hey, let's do this. And so I just want her to get that shout out. And I'm really glad to see, hi, Monica, to see, and I'm getting some texts if you see me distracted. It's that last minute RSVP kind of thing that's happening. So we may see some other people start to populate our Zoom space. And you got the booklet. Thank you, Monica. So yeah, I'm just really happy to be here. And I am such a fan of this booklet and this process, because I think what happens to so many of us is we have these great plans that we need to get some of these things in place. And it's inevitably the thing that makes it to the bottom of the to-do list, because there's always something more important to be dealing with. So thank you to everybody who carved out this time to be here. I think it's easier to do this in community sometimes, where we're moving each other along. So thank you all for being here.
Well, why don't we start off with a word of prayer, and then we'll dive in. Blessed are you, O Lord of life. And so we give you thanks that in you we need not fear death. And we ask that you bless this conversation today, that you guide us, that in this time together we might prepare to die a good death, that we might live in confidence, leaving behind a legacy and goodness for those we love. Amen. So we're going to start off. First of all, some of you have physical copies of the Five Wishes booklet, and some of you don't. If you don't have a physical copy of the Five Wishes booklet, I'm going to ask you to type your email address in the chat, and then I'm going to email you digital versions of the Five Wishes booklet. And if you have a physical one, but you would rather have an online one, that's fine. Go ahead and put your email address in the chat. And then what we'll do is we've got a little introductory video talking about what Five Wishes are, and it's put together by a college in Wisconsin, so it's got a little Midwest flair to it. And then what we'll also do is see a little introductory video that shows you, for the folks who just put in your email address, it'll show you how to access the Five Wishes document online. So go ahead and stick in your email addresses, and I will start that first video. And please let me know if this starts and you can hear it.
Hi there, Kendall here, and I'm here to talk to you today about a topic that is more on the serious end, but also very important. We're here to talk to you today about the Five Wishes campaign, and I'm here with Angie and Eric to talk to you about their mom, Lori, who was an NWTC employee in enrollment services. And can you just tell us kind of what happened with your mom, and what you think the Five Wishes campaign is all about and everything?
I believe that the Five Wishes campaign is very, very important. Our mother, Lori, worked here for 17 years. She passed away of an aneurysm, and luckily she did have her five wishes filled out, and it made our decision a lot more comfortable and comforting to be able to honor and to follow her wishes.
What the Five Wishes does is it provides an outline for your loved ones in regards to how you want to be cared for in the event that something were to happen to you. It talks about the medical treatment that you want, how you'd like to be treated, how you want people to remember you if that's what the outcome is, and what you want your family and friends to know about you.
Okay. So I guess what are, some of the things that you like best about this document in comparison to, some living wills or some of the other documents that are out there?
My favorite part of it actually is what I want my loved ones to know. One very unique thing that my mom did was at the end she wrote us each a letter that addressed us personally, and that was really touching and something that you have to hold on to for the rest of your life. So when I filled mine out, I did the same as my mom did. I thought that was really cool and really nice.
Yep. What I liked best was it took away the guessing part for us.
Okay.
It took away any anxiety that we had with any decisions that we had made because she had already made them for us. I think one of the other cool parts that she did was she decided to donate her organs, and had we not had this document, we might not have fulfilled those wishes, and I think that it was very impactful, and I think that it's a great story to give and to have others know.
Absolutely. I think that anytime that you lose a loved one, it's a hard enough situation to be going through, but then to have the outline of what that person's wishes are makes it easier on, not that it's easy, but just a little less on you. You have things made, decisions made for you.
Yep, I agree 100%. It gives us great peace of mind knowing that we were able to follow her wishes, and there was no guesswork at the end. Did we do something wrong? Did we not honor her wishes? We knew exactly what her wishes were because of the five wishes, and I highly recommend that everybody fills this out and takes all of the decision-making process out of it, in a horrible time.
And nobody really wants to think about it. Nobody wants to plan for that process, but out of the respect for your loved ones and what you'd like done, it's a great thing to do for yourself and for your family.
Absolutely. I like how you say respect for your loved ones, because that really, it's what it comes down to. So,
thank you.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the five wishes at all? Just do it.
I would highly recommend filling it out and just do it. I mean, and even if you're not married, if you have a loved one, it does give you the option of, it says the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. And I know the five wishes is honored in 40 states. Wisconsin is one of them, and I would get mine today and fill it out right away, because you never know when something's going to happen. We're living proof of that. My mom was perfectly healthy, scored a 99 on her HRA every year, and we never saw it coming, but it did happen, and it can happen.
Well, thank you for sitting down with me today and sharing with us the five wishes and your story. And if anyone has any questions, on April 16th we're having a lunch and learn to talk about the Five Wishes campaign, and you're also able to receive your own documentation, so that way you can fill it out to give your loved ones all the guesswork is done. Your loved ones.
All right. And I think I have just sent it to everyone who requested it. I may have gotten your names slightly wrong, but your email addresses should be correct. So I think you can change your name that's listed on there. I invite you to go check your email if you requested one and see if it's in there to let me know if you didn't get it. All right, everyone who needs one has one. Great. Well, then we're going to watch a little short video from the Five Wishes website itself, explaining to you how you actually access the online document.
Tutorial will review how to complete your Five Wishes online. You can log into the customer portal by clicking on the login link in the upper right-hand corner of our homepage. Here, enter your username and password. Remember that your username is your email address. Once logged into the customer portal, click on Go to 5 Wishes Online. To begin completing a new 5 Wishes Online, or to print out your 5 wishes to complete by hand, or to send someone a 5 Wishes Online as a gift, click the left button. To return to a 5 Wishes Online that you've already begun in this account, click the Return to Edit button on the right. For this tutorial, we'll click on Start New or Send Gift. We can see my 5 Wishes Online document here. And whether I want to fill this out online, to print it and fill it out by hand, or to send it to someone as a gift, I'll click to begin. To send as a gift to someone, select Give 5 Wishes to a Friend. To print out and complete by hand or to complete online, select Start Your 5 Wishes. If I select Give 5 Wishes to a Friend, I'll be taken to a form to enter their name and email address. This person will then receive an email with instructions on accessing their 5 Wishes Online document. If I click Start Your 5 Wishes, I'll be asked to enter my name, state of residence, and birth date to begin my 5 wishes. I'll need to do this whether I want to print and complete my 5 wishes by hand or complete it online. Then click Next to continue. Here I can select if I want to fill out the document by hand or complete it online. Even if I choose one of these options now, I'll still have the option to choose the other option at a later time. We'll select Fill Out by Hand. When I select Print and Fill Out by Hand, a PDF of my 5 wishes will be produced that I can now save to my hard drive and print. Depending on your browser, this might open in a new tab automatically, or be saved to your Downloads folder or another folder you've configured. For best results, we suggest you use Adobe Reader for your 5 wishes. You'll see that my name and birth date are on the cover, and I can now print this document and complete it by hand. If I had completed the document online, the information I entered would appear in these fields. Your 5 wishes can be printed in any of the 28 languages that 5 Wishes is available in. We also have a letter to my agent and letter to my doctor or provider that can be printed and given to your healthcare agent and to your physician. If you ever have any questions about using 5 Wishes Online, you can submit a customer service case under the Help menu and submit new customer service case.
All right. Hopefully you've all successfully got either now a hard copy in front of you or an online copy. Everyone set? Great.
I think we might have one person, Lori, I think this is Lori Howard, who may have come on after the explanation. So Lori, if you want to type your email into the chat so that you can follow along, or alternatively, I can bring you a booklet at a later date. I have extra physical copies. But just type your email, Lori, if you want to get the information about the electronic PDF. I'm wondering also if we can put the link for the YouTube video for how to do that in the chat so people can copy that and have that easy.
I'd be happy to. And I noticed Cindy has joined us. Cindy, do you have either an electronic copy or a digital one? Or a paper one, I guess?
Yes, I do.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. I will put that link into the chat. And if anyone else wants a digital copy, let me know. Put your email address in there, and I will email you a digital copy of this. But now we're going to go question by question through the 5 questions. Ideally, you could fill it all out right now, but we understand you might not get to it today. So we'll just go through the questions and invite you later to go back and have a conversation with your loved ones as you fill it out. But to kick us off, I invite Todd Kimmelshoe to talk to us about question number 1.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Todd Kimmelshoe, and I also want to give a good shout out to Tammy Ritter. She cornered me one day and said, aren't you a member of Faith Lutheran Church? And I said, yeah. And she says, I've got a project I want to work on together. And it came out of an experience she had with a neighbor who unfortunately passed away at a young age, with a young family, and she asked Tammy to help make decisions for her family after she'd passed away. And of course, she had done no planning whatsoever. And so that was a very difficult time for Tammy, and this conversation came out of that. So the first wish, and maybe the most important wish, is who do you want to make your decisions for you if you're incapacitated or cannot do that? A little homework on the internet and Googled people making decisions for you at death or near death situations, and you can imagine there's all kinds of information out there. So when you're making this decision, you might want to do that. And pick that person who you think is most qualified to do that. Now, that person could be your spouse or a child or a sibling or a cousin or a friend or, a trusted neighbor. But I think the keys to this are when you choose a person, the person needs to be able to talk to your doctors, look at your medical records, and make decisions about different tests and procedures that you are not able to get permission for yourself. And so it's really important that you choose someone you think will best honor the wishes and preferences for your care. And that's really important too. I think you just don't want to say, hey, I'd go to my brother and say, hey, you want to be my proxy? They call it a proxy as well. And then he may say, yeah, but then when the time comes, it's like, wow, these are some tough decisions. And so I think it's very important that you interview these people or talk to them and say, this is not just somebody I want you to be my buddy. I want you to be able to make decisions for me, which could be a life or death situation. So make sure the person you choose is comfortable in the role. So once you choose someone, take the time to explain what that role is, and hopefully the person will feel responsible for making medical decisions on your behalf. And they need to be able to answer questions and communicate any goals or wishes you may have for your care. And sometimes, in the medical, you have to be your own advocate. And so you want to make sure that you have someone that will definitely advocate for you. And I guess the final thing that I would say is that you can change this situation. You can change this person anytime you want to. If as you advance in age and that person is no longer the person you think ought to have the proxy for you, then maybe it's time for a change. And that's what's good about the 5 wishes. You can go back in and make these changes anytime you like. So it's something probably those of us that are people of faith, something to pray about and see who you think would be best for you. And like I said, it sometimes maybe it's best that it's not a family member who would get overly emotionally involved. Maybe it's better that you pick a trusted friend or neighbor. So, and then finally, I think it's probably really advantageous that that person lives nearby, at least in the same city or town for you. So that's kind of what I found out. But again, you can find all kinds of information, as you well know, on the internet. So with that, thanks a lot for showing up, everybody, today. I think it's something that we don't necessarily like to talk about, but it's something that we have to face. And the more prepared you are, I think it's easier for your loved ones that are left behind. So thanks, Ben and Lisa, for helping put this together, and Tammy as well.
Thanks, Todd. And Reb Lisa, would you like to introduce the next person who will present wish number 2?
Yes, and before I introduce Dr. Madeline Marcus to walk us through wish number 2, I just wanted to reiterate the part about that it's difficult to do this work now, but while we can and we're of sound mind, it's really important to do it. And part of what happens, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, but I just want to reiterate it because I've walked people through this place where they're not as organized with their last wishes. And what happens is that the family is left dealing with a lot of what we say in Yiddish, tachlis decision-making, which is like logistical things, when really at end of life and death, you really want to be more present spiritually for what's happening in that transition. And when you're sort of preoccupied with really like logistical decisions like this, it takes away from that opportunity for our ability to help accompany someone through the final days and hours of their life, which can be very beautiful spiritually. So that's one of the reasons that I'm motivated to help people do this work now. So I want to introduce Madeline Marcus, who is a member of the congregation Beth Israel, pediatrician, and just bring some expertise to some of these questions that are on here. So Madeline, if you can just unpack or walk us through what question 2 is a little bit, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. It's an honor to be here. And as soon as I heard about this project, I was very pleased. My husband actually noted that the video about the family that dealt with these issues was dated 2015. And I think people have been made much more aware of mortality and important decisions during the pandemic, and that we may be facing these issues much more acutely, much faster than we might have otherwise, and realizing the stress and strain that goes into that. My special interest in this area is because my initial training was in pediatric hematology oncology. And as part of that is dealing with very important life and death decisions, but also understanding what death looks like in a hospital setting or a hospice setting, and realizing that, like all tension times, it doesn't necessarily bring out the best in your relatives. And I have had relatives such as estranged parents who hadn't seen their child in years suddenly wanting to be the one in control. And of course, the consent issues are very different with children, but if you don't fill out these kind of documents and these kind of wishes, it leaves it to whoever is around in your family to make these decisions. So I encourage you, even if you find it difficult, if you have parents or relatives or ex-spouses or anybody who you are in that kind of circle of influence with, to address these issues. The first kind of open area on question 2 is what life support means to me. And I think that's a very important question to ask and reflect, because it has such things to do with issues of faith, as well as concepts of what do you think your life is. There, we hear from families all the time in end of life situations, I want you to do everything for her. Well, imagine that in something as unpleasant as a war, our government did everything possible to win the war. That would include nuclear weapons in every conflict. So just because there is technology available, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is in your best interest to have that be done on your behalf, especially in a situation. Another issue for those who may be dealing with caregiving or themselves having someone with dementia is that the dementia itself is not necessarily a terminal illness. A terminal illness doesn't mean you're going to die imminently. People always say, how soon do I have? It means that is most likely going to be your cause of death. So people who have dementia might be incredibly healthy otherwise, as my father was. And so he was unable to make those kind of decisions, but luckily as a physician, he had left instructions beforehand. But it's not always sudden. It's not always a foreseeable cause. And so you really want to make these decisions. What life support means in a medical sense, what you don't realize is doctors know a lot, doctors and nurses and all those people know a lot, but we are bound by orders. In this section, it talks about, at the bottom of page 6 in a hard copy, it talks about in case of an emergency. If someone, even a good Samaritan, calls 911 for you and you do not want to be hooked up to machines, they will transport you and hook you up to machines unless there is some standing request that is made clear, and it describes how to go about that. And I would address that with your physician. But there's many levels of medical care. There's comfort care, which is palliative care, which is controlling pain. And even more important sometimes than controlling pain is controlling anxiety. You may be affected by a respiratory problem, meaning you are having difficulty breathing, and that doesn't necessarily hurt, but we are built to breathe. And the life spirit in us is built to breathe. And so if your lungs don't let you breathe enough, it's very anxiety provoking. So you can direct in this section, life support means making me comfortable in terms of controlling pain and anxiety, even if doing so might not hasten necessarily, but not prolong my life. We have many kids who we took care of, who we kept them out of pain, and they may have lived a few hours longer if we'd not done so. But as the pastor said, you know, I think what God wants from us is a good life, but also a good death. So what life support means to me, and I do offer myself through Reb Lisa and Hazan Steve, the spiritual leaders in our congregation, and even through Pastor Ben, to discuss with people what that looks like in advance, because some people say, well, I don't want them to just leave me in an alley. You know, I don't want them to give up. And that's not what this is about. This is about they have more technology available to them than you might want to use. Another issue I want to briefly address in this question is each of the answers in the second half of question 2 have, if I want my doctor to, I want to have life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help. Doctors are painful optimists, so you may want to define what you believe it will help. And I would recommend as reading to any mortal being, which is all of us, Atul Gawande's book, Being Mortal. It is a surgeon who kept everybody alive and full court press treatment until his father, also a surgeon, got cancer. And his father was much more enlightened about palliative care. And being mortal is a very, for lay people language, thing that you can be better trained about end of life things than your physician does. Even among oncologists, people who deal exclusively with cancer diagnoses in their patients, fewer than 1/3 of them feel comfortable with making end of life decisions about their parents. Our default is to use technology. So discuss that with your physician, discuss that with your loved ones. You can be made comfortable and even receive treatment for your illness with stopping short of a technological level of support, meaning ventilators. And then one last thing I would say about ventilators, people think, well, I can communicate with my family even if I need a breathing machine. When a breathing tube is put down you to breathe for you, to be what's called intubated or tubed is a easily spelled way to talk about it. The process is actually unpleasant and painful to the patient. And so the patient often will fight the ventilator and needs to be heavily sedated. And if you're intubated correctly, you cannot talk because your vocal cords are physically held open by the tube. So to say you want to be put on a ventilator so that you have time to say goodbye means that people have time to say goodbye to you, but you are unlikely to be able to respond, and you will be in and out of consciousness on the level of sedation needed. There are other things they can do short of that to help you feel more comfortable breathing, but that's something to be issued. And then CPR is the term we learn as we all learn CPR, basic life support. But by the time someone needs CPR, they have at least 2 systems down. So if someone has a heart attack in the street, they have a 50% chance of survival if someone starts CPR. But if you are in the hospital for a non-heart and lung related disease and you get to the point of requiring CPR, whether your disease is liver or cancer or any other number of neurologic diseases that are near the end of life, if your other disease is so great that you've gotten to the point that your heart and lungs don't work, the chance of any kind of meaningful survival after CPR is less than 10%. And by survival, we mean walking out of the hospital under your own volition. So things to think about, which is again difficult, but I've been part of what I consider bad medical deaths, and I've been part of what I consider very good medical deaths. And even in the unconscionable forum of deaths of children, I still have contact with some of the parents of the children who passed away under my care, because it's about helping the family to survive the unthinkable and helping the children pass into whatever is waiting to come. And a lot of those children have convinced me that that passage can be a lot better than the disease they've gone through. So anytime you've got questions, Reb Lisa and Chazan Steve at Congregation Beth Israel can reach me. And I'm always glad to have these conversations with anyone. So good luck and get your friends to fill this out. It's important.
Madeline, thank you so much, especially for making yourself available to this group and so clearly identifying the things that are really important here. I see that there's a question in the chat. What I'd like to do so that we make sure we get through all of the questions is if you have questions in each section, just kind of hold them, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end maybe to address questions generally. I just don't want to get us too far off track because one question often spawns another question from somebody else. You wanted to add something, Madeline?
Yeah, the one question that should be addressed, because it's the one thing you asked me to address, is what is do not resuscitate? Do not resuscitate, again, is if your disease advances to the point that your heart and lungs have stopped, do you want false or heroic, but I always in medicine thought that was an improper use, but artificial means used to get you back to life, meaning shocking your chest, doing compressions on your chest, and giving you medicines to jumpstart your heart. And again, so do not resuscitate does not mean withdraw food, withdraw feed, withdraw comfort, withdraw care. We give antibiotics to people who are do not resuscitate. We do all sorts of things. So if you have a very clear idea of how far you want your medical team to go, you can define that. But if you do not want those kind of artificial means spent to prolong your life at the very end when your heart and lungs have given out, whether or not anything else is working, then the do not resuscitate means to your team that you want to be taken to that edge, but not pushed beyond that. Thanks.
Do you want me to pick it up from here since I have the next question? Okay, thank you. So for question 3, I have called on 2 real experts in our community to help us unpack this question. And Helene, if you are available right now to kind of walk us through what question 3 is, and also Loretta, anything else after Helene that you might want to address in question 3. I'm calling on both Helene and Loretta because this is really a part of their work as therapists, counselors, chaplains, to humans. And so, Helene, can I turn it over to you?
Yes.
Thank you, Helene.
Please excuse my yappy dog. So in wish 3 really addresses the types of comfort that a person in the condition of dying would want. And I think the paragraph that precedes the wish number 3 sums it up very well for what I think most people would like to experience. That they want their wishes to be carried out. They want to be treated with dignity. They would like the confidence that their wishes will be carried out. And that friends, family, doctors, they sort of release all of the caregiver and medical personnel from the burden of not being able to fulfill the wishes because they're not legally able to. And that's where we get into the muddy waters of medical ethics. But using this tool, we're not asking or requiring our health proxy or our caregivers or our medical people to go outside of their legal limits. But also on the converse, they're not excused from giving the proper treatment and the proper care as required. More specific than the last wish. And focuses on pain. Enough pain medication to relieve the pain, but not be too drowsy or sleepy, not be able to communicate or be oriented. So there are these fine distinctions that are required to make signs of depression, resolutions, whatever they can. Wish to have cool, moist cloth. Keep my mouth and lips hydrated. Warm baths. The comfort care types of measures to allow them to be comfortable as they can be. Music.
Oh, it looks like Helene had a shaky internet connection and hopped off. Oh, she's back. Helene, are you back? Looks like she's trying to connect. I'll ask Helene, can you hear?
Okay, I was muted.
Okay, great.
Yes, I can hear you, and I hope you can. So very specific types of care, of personal care. I want religious readings, well-loved poems read aloud when I am near death, and to know about options for hospice care to provide medical, emotional, and spiritual care for me and my loved ones. For personal bias towards hospice care, they can provide an incredibly supportive environment, both medically and emotionally, spiritually, and for the caregivers, and they're highly trained and experienced in the end of life experience. So I would recommend interacting with them, and that's a scary kind of decision if you're in the position of making that decision, or more likely you might be in the position of making the decision with your loved one. And it seems like a big transition to go either to palliative care, hospice care. Hospice care is basically saying, you're not likely to recover. We don't have any more treatment. The treatment would be make you miserable, more miserable, not have a high likelihood of working and prolonging your life in a way that you want. So that's a big step. And even going into palliative care means you turn your care over to a new team of medical people. That's another juncture where there's already so many things, there may be so many things going on, and to make that decision that, okay, we're gonna change to a different level of care and have different people involved in making those decisions medically. I really like this wish because it's so specific. Like, I don't want to be massaged with warm oils as long as I can be. That does not sound like something I would enjoy. Obviously, you have the right to change your mind when you're in that situation. But this is very specific. This comes down more to the nitty-gritty of care, of nursing care, of what caregivers can provide. The point number 2 on wish number 3, I think, is also kind of problematic. And if a person is hallucinating, if their mental abilities are deteriorating, or their mental abilities go in and out of being cognizant and being not cognizant, that can be a very difficult time to determine what the person wants and needs. And if the person is able to communicate. It's just super confusing when somebody's hallucinating and you're trying to relieve their distress and their misery, and they're frightened, or they see you as a monster. It's just there are these really tricky decisions. I think it's wonderful to 5 wishes, and I think it's wonderful that it's so specific. And if you're the medical decision maker for a loved one, realize that there are going to be fine details that were not considered, going to be just really particular to your own, their own situation and their own health needs. I also encourage everyone to review their 5 wishes and update them, not only for their medical proxy and decision maker, but our life experiences may really affect the choices that we made when we initially filled this out. And so it's important to reflect on it and change it as needed before you can't make those changes, before you can't express what you need. Okay.
Thank you so
I
much.
hope I covered most things.
Covered it very well. Thank you so much. And Loretta, I'm wondering if you have anything you would want to add to this section on wish 3, given your your expertise as a chaplain in this area. Make sure to unmute.
I'm sorry. I think Helene did very well on 3. My biggest concern is wish 4. I think that's more my area. I'd like to comment on it after that is presented. And then I have a general statement that I would like permission to make at the end of the presentations.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Helene, for walking us through Wish 3. And Loretta, certainly when I finish talking about Wish 4, I'll turn it over to you. Before we jump into Wish 4, I want to point out real quick, I'm going to share my screen again, that if you do the online version, you'll see here where it says, I wish to have my favorite music played when possible until my time of death. Well, hopefully the person you put in charge knows what your favorite music is, but if they don't, you can add details. You click this little button here, add details, and then you can type in, the New World Symphony or something by Dvorak. So there's options there, as well as, my favorite poems. You can tell people what your favorite poems are, which might be helpful. All right. If you're using a paper copy, what I might suggest you do is simply type out those details, and you can staple it to the back of your 5 wishes. And that way people know what music to play for you. All right, on to Wish 4, my wish for how I want people to treat me. And we're moving away now from medical questions of how you want to be treated, and more interpersonal questions about how you want to be treated by your friends and your family. And for those of us who look to Jesus for inspiration, reflecting on the story of his death can be really helpful, because his death is a death in which all dignity and humanity was attempted to be stripped from him. And yet, through the choices that he made and through the choices that his loved ones made, he dies with incredible dignity. So in question 3, we heard about being massaged with warm oil, right? Mary anoints Jesus's feet with oil before his death. And we'll see, in the past, and Wish 3 was having your mouth moistened. Jesus will have a sponge pressed against his mouth as he approaches death. So a lot of these questions are ones in which we see biblical parallels. And that's true in Wish 4 as well. I wish to have people with me when possible. I want someone to be with me when it seems that death may come at any time. Jesus will ask his disciples to pray with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. That said, even Jesus has times when he wants to be alone, and he goes off away from people. So it's important for you to reflect on what is comforting for you in times of trial. Do you want to be surrounded by people, or do you want to be alone and have some solitude? And some of these questions are helpful to think about, not so much for your sake, but to give comfort and guidance to your loved ones. Right? I wish to have my hand held and be talked to when possible, even if I don't seem to respond to the voice or touch of others. As a caregiver, I have often visited hospital bedsides, and the person I'm visiting is completely unresponsive. And, I always wonder, I can talk to the person and pray with them. Should I touch them? And this takes that burden away from the people who loves you. And just lets them know what you want. The same is true with prayer. Down here it says, I wish to have members of my faith community told that I am sick and asked to pray for me and visit me. At Faith Lutheran, we have the prayer chain and prayer requests, and these are ways that we can let people know that you are sick and want to be visited. I'm sure Congregation Beth Israel has a similar system to spread the word. I want to be cared for with kindness, cheerfulness, and not sadness. I feel like this is a leading question, because of course I want to be cared for with kindness and cheerfulness and not sadness. I will say this can go to extremes. I don't know if anyone's a Monty Python fan and seen The Life of Brian. You may remember at the end, all these folks are being crucified, and they start singing, "Always look on the bright side of
Right.
life." Doo-doo. Yeah, right. So there's sort of, once again, there's add details, and you can be honest and say, well, yeah, I want people to be cheerful, but you can also say, but I want people to be honest and not beat around the bush and not pretend that I'm not dying. Once again, when you say, if you would like to have pictures of loved ones in your room, add details. Say who, pictures of whom. And if you have favorite pictures, say which pictures you want. And then, right, not able to control my bowel or bladder functions, wish to keep my clothes and bed linens kept clean and for them to be changed as soon as they can be if they have been soiled. Basic human dignity. And finally, I want to die in my home if that can be done. And once again, this goes back to some of those previous conversations about what it means to die a good death. And certainly in the hospital, more technology can be used to keep you alive and to sustain your life. But if death is imminent and ultimately unavoidable, it may make more sense for you to have slightly less time, but have that time in the comfort of your own home, where your loved ones can be comfortable and spend as much time as they want without having machines beeping and having nurses run in and out, and just a more peaceful transition to death. So those are my thoughts on question number 4. And once again, really encouraging you to add those details either on the online document or by writing them and stapling to the paper document. And Loretta, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, I did. Okay. I would like to go back on 4, and I would like to say, on 4, I would like people to know that as a chaplain, I have been told that people can hear when they can no longer talk or speak.
Yes.
Please be very careful about the conversation you have around someone who is passing if you are visiting them. Okay. And also, this is so important, just your presence can be such a help, not only to the patient, but to the family and to the staff. Passing is always a very tragic situation in a hospital or in a home or in a facility. Please be there. One thing I'd like to say, as a chaplain, I've called in often for passings, and family dynamics can be so very ugly. People are upset because someone is passing, and past angers and everything come out. I beg all of you, please fill out this paperwork completely. It is so important to you and your family. That's it, Ben. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Loretta. I can't agree enough with everything you said. Yeah. Well, then in that case, I think I'll turn it over to Reb Lisa for our final wish.
Thank you. So wish number 5 moves out one more dimension more to the psycho-spiritual dimension of really contemplating leaving this earthly plane and what that's going to do to our family and what we want to leave behind, not so much in terms of our things, our stuff, but of our hearts and souls. One thing I want to mention, this is very big in the Jewish community, and I don't know if it extends beyond, but there's something called an ethical will, which is something that people write that is exactly on a lot of these questions. So when you pass, it's something that your family can read. That's not so much about like who gets the car and the CD collection and all of that, but what do I want my loved ones to know? Are there any amends that need to be made that maybe I just didn't have time to do? What do I care about? What are my values? So some of that is wrapped up in some of these questions. So I highly recommend that as a spiritual practice and something that you can leave behind. And again, doing this now versus when you're pressed up against the wall and really don't have the time or the mental capacity or the physical energy to do it. This is the time to take on something like this. And it can be a very beautiful process. And it actually gives you some chance to think about like, wow, where am I in my life? And what is it that I want to leave behind in a psycho-spiritual way? So the other thing that comes up here is end of life questions. I'll go through a couple of them, but I'm just kind of generally the landscape here. So actually how you want to be, what you want done with your body when you pass, and anything that you want for a funeral, that kind of thing. For those of you who are here from our Jewish community, I highly recommend, if this is something of interest to you that you want to kind of get in place now, making an appointment with either Chazan Steve or with me or with Loretta and Helene. They have a lot of expertise in this area, because we can educate and explain the Jewish ways in how we care for our dead. They're very beautiful. I want to do some education around this as well in our community. But if you want to talk one-on-one about what that could look like for you and how you want that to be, it's really good to get all of that ready now, and to know what some of the options are for Jewish burial in our community, where the Jewish cemeteries are, and that sort of thing. I don't mean to hijack on the Jewish point of view here, but and again, in any faith tradition, I recommend that you reach out to your clergy leaders and have these conversations and get some of these details in writing somewhere, so that if when the time, I mean, in your 5 Wishes booklet is the best place. I'm so glad that the e-version has the drop down where you can write things and makes that really explicit. But again, where it says, you know, cross out anything you don't agree with, and I want to add things that you want added here, as Pastor Ben has been saying, write stuff up and staple it to the page so that people know what you're wanting there. So again, I mentioned this before, a lot of these questions, if they're dealt with now, clear the way for our family members and for us to go through, to have the good death that we're talking about, to really be present for that. So a couple of these questions you have to do with forgiveness. So that's stuff we can be working on now. We do not have to wait until, you know, we don't have a lot of time left. So I just highly recommend that any rifts or disruptions that you have in any of your relationships, think about what it might be to be at the end of your life and wishing that you had tended to those things, because it's not too late. We can tend to those things now. So for a couple of these questions at the top, I wish to have my family and friends know that I love them. That's something that can go in an ethical will kind of piece. But also, I think that gives us pause right now. Like, am I tending to that now in my daily relationships? The same thing for the next couple questions, which have to do with forgiveness, which I mentioned. The fourth bullet down, I wish for my family and friends to know that I do not fear death itself. I think it is not the end, but a new beginning for me. Well, that might not be true for us right now. Maybe we do fear death. And so that is, again, something that we can talk to our clergy leaders about that, or with friends and family. It would be really wonderful if we all got to a place where we didn't fear death. And that's part of the work that we can be doing in living a good life, is to work toward that. If you are in a place where you do not fear death, yes, by all means, write about that in an ethical will, or have those conversations now with people. So, because a lot of what happens for our family members is that they're feeling a lot of anxiety for us, if they're projecting what we might be feeling, and they should know where we are with that psycho-spiritually. I think, let's see, the bottom one in the first column, this is really important, I think. I wish for my family and friends to think about what I was like before I became seriously ill. I want them to remember me in this way after my death. Again, this is why the work is so important right now. This is a really important question, because we never know when something might change suddenly, and we are very different than we are today right now, with all of our vitality and vigor. So I can't emphasize that one enough. I'm over on the next column now, and I don't know how it's laid out electronically, so if it's not quite the same, I apologize. I wish for my family and friends to look at my dying as a time of personal growth for everyone, including me. This will help me live a meaningful life in my final days. This is what we're striving for. I think that everyone who showed up here today, that this is probably on your mind to some degree. That again, I've said this multiple times, I can't say it enough, that the more of these details that we take care of, then we can be in this place of really, I've heard it termed in the Jewish world of when we die, we are midwifing our soul back to God. And we want to be present for that, just like we're present for a birth, right? We want to really be present for this moment when we make this transition. And we want our family and our friends to accompany us through this passageway. The last three questions of the column there have to do with, as I mentioned, actually end of life when you die, how you want to be treated, cared for. And so again, I recommend reaching out to whichever spiritual leader or clergy leader is in your life to have those conversations. I just want to make sure Helene said something that I thought was really important. Whatever we put in our booklets today, or hopefully as soon after this Zoom meeting as possible, I do think it's really important to revisit this often because things change in our life. It might be a good idea to set a date on the calendar where this is an annual review. Probably it won't need to be changed too much year to year. Maybe it's something we do for the change of the secular new year, January 1. What a beautiful way to spend the first day of the new year. In Judaism, we have a different new year, but we don't have a lot of Jewish traditions for what we do on January 1. This might be a really beautiful thing to revisit our 5 wishes and see if anything has changed, or on our birthday. We have a congregant who I've been talking to who's in his 80s, and he basically wrote his version of an ethical will. And he says that every year on Rosh Hashanah, he takes that out and looks at it and, makes little changes, things that may have happened that year that were really important that he wants his family to know after he dies. So I think ritualizing this process is really important. And when I say ritualizing, I mean just making it part of what we do as taking care of our lives, putting it on. It's as important as taking the car to the mechanic, or getting our annual checkup. This is like our psycho-spiritual checkup, and I think it's really important to tend to this. I'm about to wrap up question 5, but one of the things I want to say is that if we had met in person, which would have been ideal, Tammy Ritter's hope and wish was that we would leave whichever building we were in with this completely filled out. And as you know, there is a place for witness statements. You only need 2 witnesses to make this official, as I understand it. You don't need it to be notarized. So it's a little more difficult to do that in Zoom, because in person we could probably, sit in clusters and kind of talk about different questions together. So we're not leaving today with that same sort of like, okay, we all completed this. But I do want to possibly have some way to follow up, just to check in with people, to kind of hold ourselves accountable for having filled it out. I don't know what that will look like, but I know the folks who are here from CBI, and hopefully, Ben, if you know the other folks, and if we can create a little email list maybe, and just kind of follow up and check in with people, or in a month or 2 or 3, if people need a follow-up to do the final pieces. I really want to make sure that we complete this process. And I know it's a little harder to do that in the Zoom atmosphere. So I'm just cheerleading us all to kind of get to the finish line on this together. If anybody who's presented so far has anything they would want to add to wish 5, I welcome your contributions at this point. Yes.
I'll jump in real quick and say, for those of you at Faith Lutheran, I've got a lovely little worksheet to help you plan your funeral service that gets into all the specifics of our liturgy. And I really encourage you to do it, in part because, as has been emphasized over and over again, the more that you can prepare ahead of time, it means the more time your loved ones can spend honoring and remembering you rather than dealing with logistical details. But also, you know, I often ask families, well, what was so and so's favorite hymn, or what was so and so's favorite Bible passage? And they say, I don't know. And what a gift for you to be able to tell your loved ones that, so that every time they sing that hymn, they know they're singing it with you. Or every time they read that passage in scripture, they think of you. This is a gift. Truly, I love that idea of an ethical will, Reb Lisa, which is not a term I'd heard before, but I think we should think of it that way, right? These are gifts that you can leave your loved ones after you die.
So I think we have a little bit of time just for general questions people may have to ensure that you, as I said, get to the finish line on this. Is there anything that you want to ask any of the people who have presented so well? Thank you to everybody who helped unpack these questions.
Do we get a free pint of Ben & Jerry's when we complete this?
You want your sticker or your prize? Yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
I filled out my 5 wishes.
Ask me.
Yeah.
Good question. Yes, if we had met in person, we probably would have had something like that. Or would have been eating together while we did this, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I see that Rhonda had a question or wants to share briefly. Are you there, Rhonda?
I'm here. How's everybody doing? I took a lot of notes. I really appreciate this workshop. And I have a will, but it's not like as detailed as I should have it. I appreciate all of y'all's input. Reb Lisa, you gave me 2 books. I can't find them for the life of me. So instead I'm taking notes. Maybe that's supposed to be what I'm doing. But I just wanted to share with everyone here that the making a decision for yourself or for loved ones to not resuscitate is very controversial, and it's extremely important. I am very, very thankful that my my ex-husband and I, the father of my firstborn child, when he was dying of cancer, we quickly, of course, agreed to not resuscitate. And you know, he had control of his morphine. And I know that people have different views of pain relief and meds, but you know, as much power as we can give to the dying person, I think that that's really, really important. My son was, he was 13 at the time. He died of leukemia. He had the choice of pressing the button for more morphine if he wanted it. Even though it's really hard to watch that, it is so very powerful at the same time, because he had still some control as he was dying, you know. And Loretta, I really, really appreciate you sharing the importance of watching what you say in a person's room when they're dying or appear incoherent, you know. Hearing is the last to go. Yeah, really, really important to watch what you say, because they can still hear. They can hear according to what I believe until they transition. So I just wanted to share those things, and also thank you all for this workshop.
Thank you, Rhonda. Heather has a question about DNR. Does a DNR affect in-home support services? Madeline, can you address that?
In the only state I can be sure of responding is California. I've practiced in other states as well, but it does not affect in-home services. What I will say is relative to what Helene had talked about advocating for hospice, doctors again tend to put people on hospice right at the very end. We all know people who've been put on hospice and died within the next 12 to 24 hours. And that's really, if you can make that transition earlier so that you have the support at the time of the passing, that's better. Do not resuscitate really is just that. It is, if the heart and lungs stop, don't try to restart them. But in the question 3, or question 2, it breaks down, would you want dialysis? Would you want antibiotics? And, you know, physicians who kind of have somewhat blue or dark humor sometimes refer to pneumonia as the old person's friend, because to die of pneumonia is to become septic, where the bacteria go into your bloodstream and your heart and lungs stop. And if you're DNR, it's a sleeping death rather than some of the respiratory heart failure type deaths where you struggle to breathe with each breath. But a do not resuscitate order, especially for people at home, literally means that if your family brings you out to a restaurant and you fall over unconscious, that a good Samaritan can't force someone to resuscitate you, pushing on your lungs, pushing on your chest, shocking your heart, and putting you on a breathing machine. That your wish is, if nature has gone that far, I want you to let me go the rest of the way. But you still receive nursing service, medical service, and social service. The other thing that it occurred to me to add onto wish 2 in the summary is, do you want testing still done? If you were compos mentis enough to discuss it, then they'll ask you. It's not like what you wrote in your 5 wishes would supplant your own decision making.
Right.
But there are medical protocols that if we're doing this, we're going to draw blood every week. And I've had so many families that are, why do you have to stick him? Why do you have to do that if their life expectancy is not? So you can say, you know, I don't want. The other thing is nursing protocols, especially if you're in a facility. My father was demented and didn't, was still conscious, but did not respond socially to people at all. But the nursing protocols in his facility, even for patients, was that they be turned every 2 hours. And he was never expected to rise from that bed again. And my mom had to go through hearing him yell, ow, 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 no, 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 please no, because they turned him and he had bed sores by then. And so they were turning him every 2 hours in the last 12 hours of his life. So again, as Helene said, giving your care team permission to respect your wishes and override their protocols, to say, if I am not expected to ever sit up again, you don't have to turn me over every 2 hours. You don't have to check my white count daily. You don't have to, because, you know, read Being Mortal. It is quite the eye opener and very uplifting, not a downer of a book, but I've bought it for friends when they've had a life limiting even diagnosis made, to say, look, this is something you should know going into the treatment of this diagnosis. But do not resuscitate literally is just that. If you make someone do not resuscitate in hospital, doctors and your care team may ask more questions. Do you want them fed? Do you want them hydrated? Do you want, but do not resuscitate out in the world literally means, if my heart stops, leave it there. Who is that?
Yes, Loretta.
Oh, you're muted.
Still muted. There we go.
All right, Madeline, this is a very rough situation I'm going to bring up, and I've heard it said, I've heard a doctor talk to family and ask if they wanted to take the person off life support. And the family became very upset and said, I cannot murder my loved one. Would you explain why? taking somebody off life support is not murder, please.
Thanks for bringing that up, Loretta. That's another very, it's taking someone off life support is not escalating care. And again, with humans, and what we've really missed in the last 9 months is the need for physical contact. And when someone is on a ventilator, the family can hold a hand or rub an arm, but it's much harder to lay with the person. It's much harder to, be with the person you love who is going through this transition. To discontinue life support is to say, we are keeping something that is going to die, someone or something that is going to die, alive just by the machines. I have seen patients in ICUs on heart pressure assist devices. So there's an outside device pumping their heart, a ventilator breathing for them, and a dialysis machine doing their kidney work. And the soul, the person you think of as yourself, or that you think of as the people you most love, that soul wasn't there anymore. I mean, that person was never going to speak again, was never going to feel other than physical pain again, but they certainly weren't going to emote again. And so to withdraw life support means, like we said, artificial, not heroic efforts, but artificial efforts to prolong a dying process that was going to happen anyway. And it's an incredibly hard decision for families to make. But, people say to me, I don't want to give up. And it's not giving up, it's giving in. It's letting what we can't fix medically proceed along, what nature and God meant to be. But it's also giving you back, maybe for a little bit, the emotion and love of, if they're allowed to come out of the sedation that they needed to have a hard plastic tube in their throat. I've seen people, even in the of dying, have moments of a little more alertness once the sedation is turned off, so that they can hear you. So again, it's never murder. In California, it's illegal for us to murder anybody, even a dying person. But to withdraw life support means to make natural that which has been made artificial.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other final questions?
It looks like Lori may have her hand up, or she's giving a high five.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure. Lori, is that your hand up?
It is. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have the booklet in front of me, so I will look at it. But just to clarify, if you are out somewhere healthy, basically, and you have a DNR for, like, does it give specifics on what that exactly means? If you're out at a restaurant and all of a sudden you have a heart attack or something, and aren't there plenty of people who have been brought back and lead healthy, happy lives after their heart stopping or they stop breathing? So is there some way to differentiate? Look, if I'm in how do they differentiate? Oh, this person could come back. No, this person couldn't. I've heard many stories of people in comas who they just said, nope, sorry. And several months later, they had full full lives again, and vice versa. And so how do you differentiate? And I guess that question is probably to Madeline, or yeah. Thank you.
It's a really good question. The 5 wishes, another reason I really like any kind of tool like this, like the 5 questions or a living will, is everything but the cardiopulmonary support order. Even if you've got the 5 wishes filled out, stapled to your purse, on your refrigerator, whatever, it is not a do not resuscitate order. So have no fear, even if you have written, I don't want to be kept alive on machines. If you keel over as a healthy young adult or even elder, people will resuscitate you. The default of every expectation is you will be, attempts will be made. For my mother, who has multiple relapse stage 4 ovarian cancer, before COVID, she really enjoyed going to the grocery store. She said to me just last week, I want to go to the grocery store. Your sister hasn't let me out of the house in 9 months to go to the grocery store. And so there is a possibility that her tumor could erode into a blood vessel and she could keel over at a grocery store. And the default for anybody is call 911. And the default for 911 is to resuscitate anybody who doesn't have rigor mortis. So she has a DNR order that is in her purse, on a bracelet, and on her refrigerator. So if someone should happen by, if one of her home nurses is there, or a neighbor brings her cookies or whatever, and she is found down, there's an orange note on her refrigerator that says, this woman has a DNR, please do not. But for a healthy person, this is not saying, if I get hit by a truck, I don't want to be put back together. This is saying, and then the coma question is a totally different question, but people who are in comas are usually in facilities because you need a lot more care than just someone who is end stage disease at home. In those stages, a DNR, again, is if your heart and lungs stop, then do not resuscitate. But people who are kept in vegetative states on ventilators or breathing on their own, a lot of those people have DNRs. And it's true, doctors predict things wrong, but realize that the person waking up from a coma after X number of time is the true exception. Those are the ones that get out in the media. And that when people say, everything is probabilities, any doctor who tells you an absolute is kidding themselves or kidding you, except for brain death. When someone says your loved one is brain dead, that literally means is they are incapable of moving their heart and lungs without the support. That's not just a coma. A coma just means they're unconscious and they don't respond to things around them. But no one has ever medically awakened from being brain dead. It is death, and in some states it qualifies as death and they don't have to ask you to withdraw life support. They can just turn off a ventilator and pronounce someone dead. But the DNR literally is, if whatever else is going on is going to kill me, like I said, the demented person, if a demented person has a heart attack and becomes incapacitated, they very hopefully have a living will or a 5 questions pamphlet that says, if I am not able to care for myself and my disease has progressed that I'm not going to come back into myself, if something happens to me like a heart attack, don't fix the heart attack. But healthy people, we're not throwing ourselves between healthy people and resuscitators saying, no, she has a DNR. You don't have a DNR, even filling this out. It is not legally binding as a DNR. A DNR is something else is wrong with me, And if it has progressed to the point that I am no longer conscious, don't artificially prolong my dying. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was great.
Well, then I think the final thing we have is to encourage you, as you fill this out, do so with a loved one. Great if you are socially isolated with someone right now, you can do it with them. If you're not, maybe over the phone. And then once you have finished the document, please contact the people who you have put as those folks in charge of these decisions and talk through the whole document with them, the whole thing. And to say this should be a wonderful life-affirming conversation, because at the end of the day, you're saying to this person, I trust you literally with my life, and I want to take this time to share with you what matters most to me. And to help you truly believe that this is a life-affirming conversation, we've got one more video for you to see of a lady talking about how she shared this conversation.
Aloha kako, I'm Clara.
Can you hear that?
And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to share how meaningful the conversation session was for me, especially since it made me realize now is the time to deal with it. It was always someday. And with my husband, we were able to talk through some of these conversations and putting them together to share with our children when we visit in the month of May. They are scattered in North Carolina and California. They know part of it, and we've talked, but putting it down was wonderful to be able to think ahead and visualize how I would like my end days. It was also fun to realize I'm getting used to crispy bedding, so I'd like to have my bedding freshly laundered and to go very peacefully with soft Hawaiian music. But you know, to share that is such a joy at this time and peaceful. So if you've not had the opportunity to do it, now is the time. Tomorrow is here if I've learned anything else from all that's been shared. Aloha.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And Reb Lisa, would you please close us in a word of prayer?
Yes, I'm actually going to share a Hebrew chant, because as I was preparing for today and just hearing what everyone has shared, these words came to mind from a Hebrew chant, that what we're dealing with and where we want to go as we prepare for the good death and live our good life is to maximize the amount of love we're sharing and compassion, and that we're treated with kindness in our final days, and that we have a sense of peace and wholeness. And I couldn't think of a better way to close us out than to chant these words with you and for you. I'll put them in the chat, both in Hebrew and English. So we're going to close with melody. Let me make sure that I've got this here. Some of you may recognize this. Ahava Rachamim Chesed V'Shalom Ahava Rachamim Chesed V'Shalom. May we be on this journey together of the good life and preparing for a good death with love and compassion and kindness that leaves us with a sense of peace and wholeness. Amen.
Amen.
So stay in touch with Pastor Ben and with me and with each other, and we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to meet you, Pastor Ben.
Oh, likewise. Oh, fun for our congregations to get to do something together.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. You guys were awesome. It was super helpful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It was very overwhelmingly, emotionally enlightening and inspiring. Hi, Pastor Ben, Rhonda here.
Good to see you, Rhonda.